Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending our session on Configuring Concur for Audit Success. My name is Sandra Glenn, and I've been with Concur for a few days shy of 28 years. I work in the SAP Concur Audit Services team, primarily on the Intelligent Audit and Verify services.
Hi, and my name is Tammy Noyes, and I have been with Concur for 15 years, working on premium implementations, and my primary focus for the last 5 years has been WalkMe.
My name is Michaela Durnekova, and I'm from Bristol Myers Squibb, where I'm working as a global expense process lead. I've been with BMS now 11 years, and I started in China, in Shanghai, as a regional expense manager, and currently I'm based in UK.
Awesome. So today we are going to talk with you about the Concur Expense Configuration Diagram and some of its key features for compliance and regulatory guidelines. We will be focusing on groups, policies, expense types, workflows, audit rules, receipt limits, and attendees. So let's begin with our configuration diagram. Your employees are the root of our configuration diagram, our configuration tree. Compliance and audit success starts with your users and how they interact with the Concur expense system. All of these configuration options are available under your administration tab, but since we clearly cannot cover all of them within our time frame, we're going to focus on the trunk and a few of those key branches.
So as Sandra mentioned, we can't cover the entire diagram within this time, so we're going to be focusing on the trunk, which is the groups, and then a few branches, the policy, audit rules, receipt limits, and attendees, and then some leaves on that tree, the expense types and the workflow. So let's get started with the trunk, groups. So Concur groups function as a central structure by providing a hierarchical framework that determines how employees interact with the system functionally and from a regulatory perspective. Groups form the core structure element that supports all of the configurations, such as the tree supports the branches and the leaves and the entire canopy. So Concur groups support policies, forms, approval workflows, and user permissions. So some best practices for groups is the naming conventions. So you want to use clear, descriptive names that indicate the group's purpose and the hierarchy level. Organizational strategy. So you want to plan that group structure carefully before implementing, as hierarchies are very difficult to change once they're established. And then the maintenance. So regularly review those groups assignments and then inherited configuration to ensure that optimal system performance. So Michaela, how is BMS using groups?
So when we started with implementation of SAP Concur, it was 18 years ago. So our main objective was to have one global expense system. So at the time we had 4 different expense systems, with one of our region already using Concur. So that required us to re-implement what was already in place in that region and expand it globally. So that's why our policy groups are structured by market. But I need to say that over the time it proved that the maintenance, it's much easier to have it in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I like global standardization, I really do.
So now we're going to talk about a few of the branches that come out of the groups. So we'll start with the policies. So Concur policies serve as that branching framework that determines how business rules and compliance requirements are applied across the different user groups and scenarios. So just as those tree branches extend from the trunk to support the leaves and provide specialized functions, policies branch out from the group configuration to deliver that targeted functionality, approval workflows, and then the data entry requirements for specific organizational needs. So policies are assigned to groups, and you can assign a single policy to multiple groups, or you can have multiple policies to a single group. So users can choose which policies they want to use when you have multiple policies, but one is designated as a default. So Michaela, how is BMS using your policies?
So similar to groups, our policies are structured by market. So we currently have 43 expense policies, and exception is P-card. We also use P-card, so we have 11 P-card policies.
43 is a lot. Why 43?
So we, as I mentioned, similar to groups, we went to the same direction. So we built it by market. And with P cards, we initially started like with 5 policies. The objective was to have them configured by region. So, but because of some regulatory requirements, we needed to expand some of the P-card policies for certain markets. But I would say that, again, similar to groups, if you stay standard as possible as you can, and to have it in this way helped us to implement any new things which arise, right? Like I will use example of IBAN show or in France, digitalization. So when these new requirements came, we didn't need to really think about how we are going to impact some other markets who are using, for example, if you would have share policy. So that's why it's much faster, the implementation, and change management is much easier.
Makes sense.
So, and as a best practice, I would mention that if you stay standard, do it as much as possible and really introduce local requirements if there is a clear statutory or regulatory requirements. So it will help you with the change management and overall the maintenance of the program.
All right, so then we're going to move on to the expense types. So the expense types serve as the detailed branching network that determines how specific expenses are categorized and processed and then accounted for across the organization. So just as those tree branches extend from that main trunk to support the leaves and provide specialized functions for the different environmental needs, the expense types branch out from the policy configurations to determine targeted expense processing capabilities, the form assignments, the accounting integration for specific spending categories. So these standardized buckets make it easier to track what employees are spending on and where. So this is a screenshot of the expense type descriptions of what those descriptions look like. These are available to users, and it helps users categorize across the organization. So using these descriptions and quick tips, it helps those users pick the right choice because it gives them more information about that expense type. So expense types are assigned to policies, and each expense type can be assigned to a single policy or multiple policies. And then the forms that can be different on each expense type as well across all those different policies. So Michaela, how are you guys using expense types?
So when we started with implementation 18 years ago, so our expense types were highly complex, and we tried to please everybody, right, in the markets to follow their local requirements. So as an example, we had like 21 different expense types related to meals. Yeah. So we had like travel meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, right? So, and now we have free. So we standardize them to have free, and instead we are using the custom fields, right? Where you can use the drop-down meal type, for example. Yeah. So, and I would say this standardization of the expense type is something we are working like constantly. We run annual report for the expense types usage, so we can determine like which expense types have not been used, so maybe there's an opportunity to retire them, etc. So, and last year we introduced quick tips, which was, I would say, like a little game changer for us, because we used to get lots of questions about like which expense type to use, and like for meal related, right? I don't know which one because of which attendee to add. Yeah. So quick tips helped us to navigate employees upfront, right? So, and it eliminates as well the questions coming to our team. And what I like about quick tips is that you can even customize them by policy, right? Mm-hmm. So even same expense type can have different quick tips text. So, and that helps as well for us, for pharma company, right? Certain markets have different requirements when it comes to attendees because they need to report for transparency. So we kind of can give through the quick tip this little description and like instructions to employees. So definitely something I really like. And what I would say as a as an advice, like try to avoid miscellaneous expense type.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
keep and keep them as standard as possible, so that as well, like in terms of naming, because it helps to employees if you are in Germany, China, US, right? So to have the same structure, same name. So, and we have lots of expats moving between countries. So,
Yeah. Then you don't need to question like, oh,
Yeah.
it was meals breakfast when I was in China, but now I'm in Germany and it's travel meals. So completely makes sense. I absolutely love the descriptions and quick tips too. It really helps with like the intelligent audit and the verify services. So that way it helps the employees from the beginning get it right and make better decisions. And that way they don't wait and their expense report gets kicked back to them. Nobody really likes that.
Nope.
no.
And from audit, we also really dislike miscellaneous. It's kind of that eternal dumping ground for, I didn't know where to put it, so I put it here. But that's also where they try and sneak the stuff that they maybe shouldn't be expensing at all.
Right. So now we're on to workflows. So Concur workflows serve as an ending point for the elements of the organizational structure, functioning like those leaves that perform that essential work of processing and routing business transactions. So as the tree leaves are the primary sites for photosynthesis and convert sunlight into that energy for the entire tree, workflows are the primary processing points for all the business rules and the approval requirements. And they're converted into structured approval sequences. So like who did what and when they did it and how they did it. And it feeds that entire financial ecosystem. So each workflow, leaf, is a specialized for specific types of approval scenarios while remaining connected to the supporting branch, the policy, and then the trunk, the group, infrastructure. So workflows are assigned to policies, and you can assign a single workflow to a single policy or to multiple policies. So Michaela, how is BMS using your workflows?
So at the end of 2023, we removed manager's approval from expense reports. And that time was like for us important to redesign, right, workflows. So we had some market like Germany where they said, okay, we still want to keep manager's approval for hospitality related expenses, but we want to benefit from the intelligent audit because instead of manager's approval, we implemented intelligent audit 100% of all expenses. So, and as well, we look like for our senior leadership, right? We wanted to have them reviewed internally. So that's why we redesign our workflows in this way. So we have 3 workflows in BMS.
Wow.
That's awesome. 11 P cards, 43 expense policies, 3 workflows. Nice. So now that your employees have that solid setup for completing an expense report, we're going to talk about some of those other branches that are going to impact their expense report submissions. So taking another quick look at our tree, we have reviewed some of those core branches, and we're going to take a look at some more of those supporting branches and how they're going to work into that compliance and audit success. So the first one we're going to look at is audit rules. Audit rules are kind of a big piece within expense, and they are the guidelines that review submitted expense reports for compliance. They're going to ensure uniform policy applications across all the employees in the departments as they are assigned per group, that trunk of our tree again. So audit rules have multiple benefits. One of them is to increase that policy compliance, automatically flag those non-compliant expenses to reduce the expense policy violations, enforce preferred vendors, maintain daily meal limits, things like that. It's also going to assist with preventing fraud, identifying duplicate expenses, missing receipts or suspicious claims, and it's going to save some time. We're going to automate the expense auditing to reduce that manual review effort, allowing finance teams to focus on those critical tasks. and we're going to have some error reduction, hopefully, because we are going to catch those common errors with things like incorrect amounts, currency conversions at the time the employee is submitting, and not again later in any type of audit process. Michaela, what does BMS do when it comes to audit rules?
We use audit rules wherever possible, like from simple reminders to really complex condition-based audit rules. Of course, to keep them meaningful, right? Just to avoid multiple exceptions. That's not what users want to see.
Yeah.
So I will use some of the examples of the audit rules we have. As a pharma company, right, one of our challenges is to make sure employees add their attendees for HCP spend correctly because of the transparency reporting and downstream reporting groups who are consuming the data from Concur. So we use audit rules to kind of like navigate employees for the HCP-related expense types, which attendees are required to add, right? They will not be able to proceed with the submission unless they edit required attendees related to HCP. So another example, I will use what we call 45 days audit rule. Okay. So we struggled in the past with some employees, even when we still had manager's approval, that they tend to not always submit all their expenses, all their transactions, right? And leave some of them unsubmitted. Mm-hmm. So, and it had negative impact on accrual, right? And like compliance, transparency, so for managers and etc. So we looked at it like how audit rules could help us. So we configured audit rule which is basically with the condition of the transaction date, right? And it starts ticking if you reach 45 days from transaction date and you want to submit any new transactions, system will not let you. So unless you add anything which is sitting there and it's old to your expense report. So so
don't let those old transactions hang out there. Exactly. I love that. So I do want to talk about just the different types of audit rules that we have available within Concur. So there are 39 default predefined audit rules, and you can use them as is, or you can configure them to whatever you need. We have custom audit rules, and those are really kind of your self-defined requirements, like you were talking about your 45 days aged or making sure you've got the right attendees. That's going to get them following that policy. There are random audit rules. Now, random audit rules are kind of my favorite because they correspond to that intelligent audit and the verify service. But honestly, any client can use random audit rules for an internal audit as well. Custom audit rules are also available for intelligent audit. So any expense report over a certain amount or reports that contain a certain expense type. And again, that could be something you could use for an internal audit. It doesn't have to be with us, but you know. And then we have validation rules. And validation rules are kind of a value comparison and a potential field update options. And in my opinion, probably one of the most underutilized audit rules. They are super cool audit rules on steroids, honestly. Where if you have like a custom audit rule with a super long list of conditions, maybe consider a validation rule. Or if there's a field that needs to be updated based on the values of other fields, you can consider using a validation rule. Do you utilize validation rules, Michaela? I gotta ask.
We do. Yes, we do. And I agree. I think there is a big potential to use them more. We use them, for example, for EV charging expenses for electric vehicles. So
those electric vehicles, we love them.
Yes, so sometimes employees struggle with the decimal places in the certain fields, right? So it could end up with overpayments. So validation rules is something which can help you with this one. Or with the random audit rules before we eliminate managers' approval. We use random we had set up like 5% of our expenses were selected for random audit. Plus we had some conditions in some markets. They wanted certain expense type to be reviewed, right? Because there was required additional documentation. So we use this as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so I want to add to that there's AI assistants being introduced to help find audit rules that have already been created, and then also in the creation of new audit rules. So you have to submit a prompt, basically, to use the AI and to generate that new audit rule. So it's recommended, obviously, when you're creating those prompts that you want to be pretty precise with it. So who will be alerted? So specific employees or groups. What will trigger that rule? So an expense type, an amount, et cetera, a transaction date. When will they be alerted? So when the expense is saved versus when it was submitted, et cetera for that. And then, for example, a prompt could say, warn all employees that spend over $3,000 on a hotel in New York while traveling in New York is going to be audited. Yeah. So, that could be a prompt, and then that'll help you write that audit rule. So, but as always, when creating audit rules, regardless if you're using AI or you're manually doing it yourself, you want to watch out for audit rule fatigue.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, so if you have too many flags going off, employees just tend to ignore them anymore. I mean, they'll pay attention to the hard stops, obviously, because they can't move forward without it, without correcting something. But those warning exception messages, they'll stop reading them if so it's audit rule fatigue. Yeah. And then those messages, you want them to be clear and precise so that the employees know what they need to do if they need to correct something.
Exactly. So the next branch we're going to talk about is really the receipt limits. So the receipt limits are kind of a necessary evil in our configuration tree. Without set receipt limits, compliance really is strained. We've got policy compliance requirements, so adherence to the company expense policy, requiring documentation for specific expense categories. Amounts, anything above a desired threshold. Local logic is going to be things like, is it a cash expense? Is it a card expense? What's the currency? And then you can also have, that logic based on expense types. We always need receipts for hotels. We never need receipts for mileage. Do we accept e-receipts or not accept e-receipts? Do we accept third card data? Do we not accept third card data? And then there's regulatory compliance, so meeting those legal requirements for tax reclaim and financial reporting, as many countries require those valid VAT tax invoices for expense reimbursement. Then there's audit requirements, not necessarily just Concur audit, but your audit, the bigger audits that are out there, and maintaining that proper documentation for those financial audits and the expense verification process. And then hopefully, with all of that, we've got some fraud prevention, reducing unauthorized or fraudulent expense claims because you are requiring that supporting documentation. And then attendees, another one of our branches is going to be those attendees, and that allows the employees to meet those corporate and legal requirements for documenting their business meals and their entertainment expenses with complete attendee information, reporting on who was there, what company they work for, and you can track those spending policies by tracking who's attending those events and the costs associated with them. It's very important for certain industries, such as pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. We do have a few kind of main attendee types. We've got the employees, so those are the people that have Concur accounts set up within the system. Then there are business guests, and those are really the people outside of Concur that you are meeting with. We've got healthcare professionals, so our HCP expenses, those are your doctors, those are the people that we need to really kind of keep a close eye on. And then we have spousal expenses. You've got expat employees, but then, is it a possibility your spouse was invited along for maybe you part of an event and they were allowed to come with? Or you're not supposed to have them on, but we're still going to check for those. So Michaela, I want to kind of hear, how do you utilize, knowing that you're an HCP type corporation, how do you utilize the attendee types?
Yeah, so we have many different attendee types. So from we utilize as well API with other business partners. We use like a web service search, which is real-time search of HCP data through the custom master database. We also utilize types like number of attendees, which for some expense types will allow employees to add count, right? Or no-shows, right? And a couple of years ago, we introduced in US e-roster for our HCP expenses. So we worked with Concur to utilize their external launch URL, which transfer HCP data to your expense report.
That's got to make it so much easier for the employees to get it right.
They love it.
Honestly.
Our salespeople in the US, they really love that.
They really love
Yeah,
it.
well, and then another popular attendee type in the U.S. is government official.
Oh, yeah.
And it's to comply with that FCPA, the Federal Corruption Practices Act. It's to help comply with that.
sure
So
we're
it's
meeting
a
those
popular one in
requirements
the U.S.
So, with all of those compliance configurations, we've kind of built our tree. We've got our solid roots with our employees. We have a strong trunk in those employee groups. And we've got all of those branches, the audit rules, the workflows, and the leaves. We hopefully have your Concur expense configuration system configured for a very fruitful and successful audit. I do want to talk about just some of the other Concur solutions, options that are available to support you on that compliance journey. Obviously, I love Intelligent Audit and Verify. Then we've got kind of our Joule base, our Joule Premium, the Walk Me process, our end user support. We talked a little bit about reporting, our consultative intelligence, the AI-powered policy assistance policy tips that you're going to hear about or have heard about, hopefully, within the keynote process. And then our expense pre-submit audit agent, which is another new one you're going to hear about even more. So I do want to give everybody just a little bit of a resource option. Take a look at our Concur Expense Admin Guide. Everything we've talked about today is going to be available in there, even more in-depth than what we can put into this time frame. So scan the code, take a look at this. And then before you get into your next session, start watching that next session, we would really appreciate your feedback on this session. It really helps us determine what things clients really want to hear about and what we should be doing these kind of sessions for. So thank you all for your time today and attention. I really want to thank Michaela for joining us.
Yes,
I
thank
appreciate
you
having
for
you
being
here. It was fantastic. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.